So it goes beyond the incidents. You're talking about the broader
I'm talking about things as they are today.
Yeah.
And things as they were then. Parmar, it took 18 months to get a wiretap.
Exactly.
And you see, democratic countries err frequently in going overboard to protect the rights of everybody. And if it was a totalitarian state, they could come in the middle of the night, get the evidence they want. It's more efficient, but we pay a price to be in a democracy. We don't have to pay as big a price as we do sometimes, but there's always going to be a price, and there's always people that think the bad guys always get away when they forget that it's because the bad guys get away that they're protected.
Certainly, you know, you wait for months to get the wiretaps and crucial evidences and all those things. Coming to the people, the victims and the families, the people who were left behind, you know, about the compensation award. There have been a lot of talk about that compensation being inadequate, you know, and you have also recommended a certain amount, if I'm not wrong, or you have just said that it should be a respectable amount.
What I said, that under the terms of reference, I was not authorized to deal with compensation. But I said in the report there was nothing that prohibited me from commenting on it. And
what made you comment?
Well, the evidence we had was the compensation took far too long, and that it was an insurance approach rather than a victim's approach. And the settlements were negotiated the way you might negotiate a injury from a car accident, that it was business.
Right.
It didn't seem, looking at the record, that there was much sympathy involved. And I thought that that was inadequate. What we heard, and we didn't hear much on the amounts, but they were not huge. There was compensation and people signed releases, but I didn't think that they had dealt with compensation properly. So what my report says is that they should appoint an independent tribunal
to award the compensations
and look at compensation, and you might, I use the term ex gratia. That means you don't consider any evidence, you simply, without fault, make compensation. Now, I don't know what that committee is doing. It's a difficult job because it's 25 years later. Some people have died, some have moved, but there's enough around that it can be done.
There are obviously, you know, similes, and there will be parallelisms that would be drawn with the Lockerbie, the blast which happened, and in which a state had owned the responsibility, Libya to be precise, and then huge awards of compensation being given. So is that a reference point also to a certain extent? Maybe not to that extent, but certainly the awards being given in Kanishk bombing were far less than what was given in Lockerbie.
Well, that question comes up, but you hear the reply that Lockerbie for years denied any responsibility. Then they wanted to join the League of Nations again. They wanted to get their oil sales. So they put up 2 defendants, and they just gave very generous amounts. I don't think it's a parallel. I don't remember the amounts, but they were millions of dollars.
Yes, yes.
And I think you have to look more carefully. They were not so interested in the victims as they were in getting their oil back in the Western markets. But nonetheless, they moved quickly and they paid generously, so that's something in their favor. We have to move, we have to pay fairly, and we have to err on the side of the victims.
And we're talking about last year, 2010, when the Prime Minister Stephen Harper would formally render an apology for Kanishk. It took quite some time for the Prime Minister to apologize.
Well, if you go through the record, there's expressions of sympathy from almost every government. It's too bad, it's a terrible tragedy, but it stopped short of what looked like an apology. Now it's interesting that in the recommendations, I didn't recommend that he apologize. I did that for two reasons. If I recommend and he apologizes, it looks as though he's
The
just
justice has been
following.
done.
Yeah. The apology was his own idea, and it was complete. I wasn't present, but it was a memorial service in Toronto, and it was a heartfelt, sincere apology, I believed.